Hello everyone, welcome back to the Gamer Coach. In today's video, we're going to be doing a full weapon ranking of all the guns in Fortnite Project Era for the last week of Season 5, which is patch 5.41. As you may or may not know, Project Era has been announced to go to patch 6.21 in the next update. So this is the very end of Season 5, so I want to give you a final overall ranking of all the guns in this current season based on your feedback and what I've experienced through the game. I did do this about a month ago. However, I've changed some of my opinions on certain guns based on obviously my own play experience and also what you said and what I've heard other people say to give a more accurate perspective from both a controller and keyboard and mouse perspective. Okay, let's go over the tiers first. So X tier. X tier is what I define to be a game-breaking gun. An example of this, the P90 and the drum gun were both X tier guns at one point. They are guns that are so defining that they define the entire game is around them. Everything, not just your guns you carry, but the heals you carry, the way you build, like everything is defined around it. So completely broken, and we never want to see an X tier gun in the game ever. S tier. S tier is still defined as broken. It's like a meta defining gun. Like, think like the Scold Spaz. Like that's be after the draw speed nerf to be in line with the other pumps. I would consider that to be an S tier gun. Or the TAC SMG, for example. They're very good. They can fulfill two roles, like the TAC SMG can be your shotgun and your SMG, but they're not like ridiculously broken to the point of being X tier. A tier is like the Scar. A strong gun, great in its role, can sub into other roles if you need it to be. It's great, it's balanced, strong, and a lot of people are going to want to use it. B tier is that solid gun. It's good, very viable, competitive. It can work in the end game. If you like it, you can use it, but if you don't like it, you're not really required to use it. C tier. C tier is kind of like the guns. They work well enough in the early game. Like they can do the job. They're not amazing. If you like it, you can run it into the end game, but it's not great. D tier are those guns that are just bad. Like you just don't want them in any circumstance. You can make them work in the early game, but even if you like them, you're not using these in the late game. E tier are reserved for the pickaxe because F tier is those joke guns. Like the OG SMG that did 11 damage, the semi-auto when it did 40 damage, the automatic sniper when it did 36. Like those kind of guns that are just complete jokes, those are F tier. But honestly, those are also just as rare as X tier, and usually that's not going to happen. So let's start off with the shotguns. Let's start with the TAC. Originally, I used to put it C tier because I truly do think that the TAC is not that competitive against the other shotguns, but after hearing your feedback and talking to some other people, I have decided to move it up to B tier. It's an okay gun, and if you like it, you can make it work. The great thing about the TAC is, well, there's two great things. One, it's easy to use, so if you're new to the game or have bad aim, this is a great gun to practice with and get better. And B, you don't really need SMG with it because of its high rate of fire. The problem is, I still don't think it's that competitive against the other shotguns. It can work, but it's not great because, one, you can't use it as a secondary shotgun. You can't pump someone and then switch to the TAC and finish them off. That doesn't work. You have to initiate with the TAC, which can be a real struggle because with the shotgun delay, if say I have a pump, I shoot, build a wall, and switch back to the pump, well, it's going to take me 1.43 seconds to get the shotgun ready again. The delay doesn't really matter. With the heavy, yeah, it's going to take a little longer. Instead of a 1 second delay, it's a 1.25. That's not bad. But with the TAC, if you shoot, build a wall, and shoot again, you have to wait 1.25 seconds. So why don't you just use a pump or heavy that's going to do more damage than try and use the TAC? You see the problem with that? This is why the TAC can't really be competitive with the other shotguns with the delay, but I do acknowledge that it can work for some players, so I'm going to put it B tier. Let's move on to the heavy shotgun. I think the heavy shotgun is a step above the attack. It's not as effective by the delay, has a way longer range, and also does way more headshot damage at the cost of rate of fire. I think the heavy shotgun is the epitome of a great gun that's not overpowered. It can't one-shot you if you have full health, but it's a strong gun and really does work quite well. So definitely A tier gun. And the same case with the double barrel. The double barrel is really good up close, terrible at range. So it really depends on your playstyle. But if you like the double barrel, it's a strong option, and it's definitely a competitive shotgun with the heavy. These two are 50-50. Like if you give me one or the other, I mean, I might run both of them because that's me. But if you can only pick one, yeah, it's really a 50-50 toss-up. Now, the pump shotgun I do think is S tier. And here's why I say that. The pump shotgun is 95-100 damage, which probably you already know. But what you may not know is that it has the full 8-tile range that it used to have when it did 80-85 damage, but it has the increased damage. So what this means is you have the old great range with the increased damage. This makes the blue pump, I would say, by most players, is going to be the best shotgun in the game. It has almost the same range as the heavy, but does way more damage than that. It can one shot and two shots to the body, which is incredibly effective. So if you give me a blue pump, I'm going to take that pretty much every time. But the green pump is definitely a step below. That's probably A tier, and that's competitive with the heavy and double barrel. So overall, I think the pump shotgun is, on average, a step above the heavy and double. But if you really like the heavy or really like the double, I could see you taking that over the blue pump. What I can't see you doing is taking any variant of the tack over the blue pump. I feel like that would be a mistake unless you really like the tack. But the green pump is more balanced, so those shotguns are more in the mix. So overall with the shotgun meta, I would say the blue pump is definitely tier 1 shotgun is the blue pump and blue pump only. A tier 2 shotgun is any variant of the heavy, any variant of the double, and the green pump. And then I would say the tack shotgun is a step low in tier 3, but you can make it work if that fits your playstyle. I still don't think the tack shotgun is A tier, but it can do the job. Okay, let's move on to the ARs now. Start with the Scar. I think the Scar is a perfect A tier weapon. It's great. It's got pretty good spread when you're full autoing. Does good damage. Has high damage per second. It's a great gun. It's way better than the Chapter 2 version. Has less bloom, faster reload, and higher headshot damage. It's just a great gun. A tier, solid. The standard AR is a step below. It's not as good. It takes one extra shot to kill because it does 33 instead of 35, 36, which means that one extra shot can make the difference. But it's still a great gun, and you could run this all the way to the end game. It's solid. It's a good choice. Now with the burst rifle, I would put the burst rifles each one tier down. So the FAMAS one tier down from the Scar, and the standard burst one tier down from the standard AR. The burst isn't a bad gun. The problem is that it has a lot of bloom in that when you first ADS, you're not going to instantly get first shot accuracy. You have to wait. And when you're full autoing, it's not going to reset on its own. You have to slow your rate of fire manually. So it's a decent gun, but it's not great. At extreme ranges, you're basically wasting 2 bullets, and the DPS is pretty low. So close range, you can't really use it to spray down walls. It's definitely a solid choice, and if you like it, you can use it. But I don't think it's to the same level as the Scar. And the Silent Scar, I'm also going to put B tier. The Silent Scar has the advantage of being very accurate at range, even while moving, which means it's very effective at long range. But if you full auto, it blooms way out of control, so it's not very good at close range. So I think it's competitive with the standard AR, but I do think because the Scar does that more damage, meaning it can take one less shot to kill, that it's the better option. But still a viable, solid B tier choice. Scope the AR, I'm going to say is C tier. Scope the AR does like 23, 24 damage with a 3.5 rate of fire. It's in the 80s for DPS. That's pretty bad. Yeah, it's very accurate. But the problem is you could just use a Scar at range, and you can hit, 3 shots a second, 3.5. You're doing 65, 70 DPS, which is almost as good as the Scope DR, but the Scope DR can't be used at close range effectively. So I just don't think it's very good. On keyboard and mouse is okay. On controller, it's complete trash. So I'm just going to put it C tier. It's a meh gun. If you like it, you can use it, but not that good. And thermal, I'm putting D tier. I think the thermal is even worse. The thermal scope is a complete gimmick, so just ignore that. But yes, it does more damage, but the DPS goes down to like 64. Like, why even bother with a thermal? Either just run a sniper or just use your regular AR. Why are you doing 37 damage with the thermal? You have to carry an SMG anyway. So, you could just run a bolt action, a hunting, do way more damage, or just, again, use the Scar, hit 3 or 4 shots at long range instead of using the thermal. It's just not good. It's not complete F tier. It's not trash. If you like it, you can use it. I admit it looks cool, so it's just not very good. Okay. So just a quick overview of the ARs then, or review I should say. Scar is your number one choice, but the Burst and Suppressed are also perfectly viable choices. Okay, SMGs. I'm just going to say this right now. I think all the SMGs are B tier. The reason why I say that is because each SMG has an advantage to it and a disadvantage, and it's really up to playstyle. Silenced SMG has the least bloom, and the second highest DPS, and the quickest reload. SMG is the highest DPS, but the second worst bloom, I should say, and the least effective range. P90 is a little bit tighter spread than the standard, has less DPS, but has a bigger mag at the cost of reload. And the LMG is a huge mag at the cost of reload, the most bloom, but the longest effective range because of the fall-off curve. Honestly, all these are viable. Like, genuinely, for me, I would take the LMG every day of the week. But I can totally see someone saying, hey, the SMG is better, or hey, the P90 is better, or the silence is better. It's amazing because there's four options and none of them are like way better than the other. When I ran a poll the other day, the vote was actually fairly evenly split. So it really is personal preference, and this is great. They're all solid choices, but I don't think any of them are A tier. None of them like really stand out as wow, this is a really strong gun. But they do all do the job. So four viable SMG choices, amazing. Snipers, heavy is A tier. I think the heavy is A tier because you can use it to one-shot walls, which makes it effective at close range, and it also does a stupid amount of damage at long range. It's a good gun, and I definitely recommend you use it if you like to use snipers. It's definitely a little more difficult to use on controller because sniping is not as effective as keyboard and mouse. But even on controller, still a great gun. Great. It's strong. Bolt action hunting, I'd put one tier below. They're both great. They're both viable. You can use them just like the SMGs. But they're not guns that are like, wow, this is a really solid gun like the Scar or the Heavy. But they're still decent. And if you like it, you can still use it. And that's the point. They're really good on keyboard and mouse, especially if you want to counter controller L2 at mid-range. Carrying a sniper can really do that. So great option. Finally, the semi-auto, I'd put C tier. It does 75, 78 damage, which I admit isn't bad. It does 195 headshot, which is actually quite solid. The problem is, after you fire one sniper shot, you know what most people are going to do? Build a wall. So it doesn't even matter that you can fire multiple shots, because whether you fire a bolt shot or a semi-shot, they're going to build a wall immediately. So I don't see why you don't just take the extra damage. It's not the worst gun in the game, though. With the buff, when it did 60 damage, I put it in D tier, but now that it does 75, 78, I'd give it C tier. So on the sniper front, there's really three viable choices. The heavy, the bolts, and the hunting. Okay, explosives. RPG is A tier. The RPG is just really good. It does a ton of damage. It's very effective at close range. It's not that effective at long range, but it's a really solid gun, and if you see an RPG, you're probably going to pick it up. It's a great gun. Synergizes well with shotguns. Highly recommend it. Grenade launch, I put one tier below. Still a good gun. The problem is the grenade launch only works at that medium range. It's completely useless at long range and effectiveness at close. And because the RPG is effective at close range, where most Fortnite battles happen, grenade launch is not as good, but it's still a decent choice, and I can definitely see people using it. The guided missile is borderline F tier. I put it D. This version is way nerfed compared to that Season 3 version that you may remember. It's okay in squads because you can send like one person as the guided and they can send that out. But in solos, this thing is literally F tier. Because as soon as you fire the guided, someone can just find you, spray your box down, and shoot you while you're using the missile. So this thing is kind of bad. I'll give it D tier on average. And the minigun I'm going to put in the Structure Destroyer category, I think it's C tier. I don't think it's as bad as the guided. It's the same sort of deal, though. In squads, this thing is actually quite good for suppressing. But in solos, this thing's terrible because it doesn't do enough DPS, and you're just going to get shredded as soon as you start using it. So it's better than the guided. It's okay, but nothing amazing, right? It hasn't gotten its buff yet, where it did 2021 damage. Okay, so for Structure Destroyers, really, you can do on the RPG or grenade launch is viable in all modes, and the minigun is viable in squads. Finally, let's do the pistols. The dual pistols, I hear people say, man, these things are really good. And I admit they actually do feel pretty good, but I'm just going to put them C tier. They're an okay gun. They're not terrible, but they don't synergize well with shotguns because their draw speed is so slow. I think they're okay. They can definitely do good work, especially when you don't have a shotgun early game. You need something at close range. These things do a lot of damage. But they just don't strike me as being a gun that's like, okay, yeah, these are like solid guns you want to carry in the end game. You probably don't want dual pistols in the end game, but for early game, hey, they're fine. Hand cannon, similar deal. It's okay. It is 30 damage at range, which is pretty meh, if you know what I mean. It's just not a gun that strikes me as particularly good. Now in Season 6, this thing is going to rocket up to S tier when it gets its damage increase at range and the structure damage buff, but doing 30 damage at range and 75 structure, it's just not good. That's the truth. Sounds pistol, same deal. It's fine. Like, all these pistols are fine. If you like them, you can run them. You could make a case you could sub it in for an SMG. That kind of works. But it's just not that good. You're giving up DPS. You're giving up magazine size. It's okay. They're not the worst guns in the game, but not great. And the standard pistol is just not good. I mean, 23 damage is 5 shots to kill early game. That's just bad. I mean, it's just not good. But honestly, that's fine. It's meant to be that gun you get off spawn. It can sort of do its job. So, in terms of the pistols, I don't really think any of them are particularly viable. They're okay early game, these three, but they're not something you're carrying to the end game. So let's just do a little bit of a recap. For shotguns, you have three options, three solid options with a fourth kind of option, you know? Like if it's one tier below the best, I would say that's viable. 2 tiers is like really putting a stretch, right? So these three, very solid. The tack is okay if you don't have a blue pump yet. It can sort of work. So for the ARs, there's also three options. Scar, you got the burst, and the suppress is also quite good. The scope is kind of it's okay. So really three good options. This SMG is great. 4 options, all evenly matched. It's just down to personal preference. Pick whichever one you like. It's amazing. Explosive / structure destroyer. 2 viable options. RPG nade launch with the minigun being alright in squads. Snipers, you've got the heavy sniper, bolt, and hunting. So 3 viable options there. And then the pistols, they're not really that good. They can work, but I don't recommend it. Wait until Season 6 when the hand cannon gets buffed. So overall, I think this meta is actually quite good. It's quite diverse. Lots of options to play around with. It's pretty fun. There's very few guns. Only the pump, I would say, is too strong right now. And there's only 3 guns I would say are too weak. I think if it's A to C tier, they're fine. So thank you for watching the video, everybody. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, subscribe, and of course, I'll see you in the next Gamer Coach video.